Okay, welcome. I'm going to do a live stream because I've just finished teaching and it's a bit easier just to switch over to the other computer, so hopefully you can hear me and there's no lag because I've just had new internet put in, so fingers crossed. Right, let's talk about Traktor 3 preferences. So first of all, we're going to load up Traktor 3 and we're going to go up to the little cogwheel at the top here and click that. And it will start off with the audio setup. Now we're going to have a basic look at these. We're not going to go in depth too much of this, but just to get you started. Okay, so the audio setup, this is where you're going to have issues. Let me just drag this into the middle, if I can. This is where you're going to have issues with sound. So if you've got your controller set up and you want that to be your sound card, your output, what you're going to do is you're going to make sure that this drop down is going to be your chosen hardware. So if you've got an S4 or an S2 or an S8, whatever, you can choose this option and then it will default to that. And that's how you listen to audio's low. 1 second, let me just boost that up, VK. Thank you very much. And let me just turn it up here. Let me see if that's any better for you. Okay. So, yeah, so you want to select one of your outputs on here. Now, if you are running internally, then you can have the built-in output. But remember, if you're going to use your S2, S4, anything like that, and you want to cue your headphones, you're going to need to select your audio device here. Okay, your sample rate is 44,100, or you can have 48,000, depending on which one you want. Thanks, VK, for letting me know. Now the buffer size, this is where your load comes into play. So if you look up here, you've got this load up here. And if this load is pushing up to the top, you're going to need to reduce your buffer size. Your latency is going to increase, but you're going to need to increase the buffer size. So if you have this right up or down to there to 64, you can see, if you see the load now, it's going mad. And therefore you're potentially going to overload your CPU. So you have to find a balance between your latency and your CPU usage. So default is 512, and you can see it calming right down for me, and that's pretty good for me. And I'm only on a Mac Mini at the moment, so if I'm on a higher spec computer, that would be even less. But then you get to the other side where you can reduce the load even more and make it more stable. But the problem is that by the time you press play, the latency from that to going and actually playing it in the software is going to be great. So I would advise to keep it around 512-ish, but you can play with this depending on your CPU. But you don't want this load going mad and anywhere near the top because you don't want it crashing. We can talk another time about phono line and routing. Peaking at around -20. That I'm at my fullest. I'm at my full VK, so hopefully you can still hear me, because I don't want to pick up too much other sounds and bits and pieces because my fan's going mad. So the phone line and the routing, I'm not going to worry too much about this now. But if you've got your, if you're running at CDJs or anything like that, and external, we can talk about that another time. But just for now, we're going to assume you've got a controller. Multi-core, enable multi-core processor support. So if you've got multi-core, you can have that ticked or not. Output routing. Now, this took me a while to get my head around when I first got Traktor. But if I'm running an S4, an S8, an S2, thanks, VK. Then you're going to want this on internal, even though your controller is an external controller, it's in your hands. It's USB'd, so you're going to want it on internal, and you can have your monitor when you've selected it in here for your headphones, and then your master is what I've selected in my audio setup. If I'm going to have it external, then I'm going to be using HID mode or CDJs or something like that, basically. Input routings, again, don't worry too much. If you're running time code, I can do another video later on, and we can talk about that, but that's where you have your inputs. External sync. Now, I'm going to do a video on this, but the link button is amazing. So you're going to be able to link Traktor with Ableton and Machina and all that kind of other softwares with Link. Again, I'm going to do that in an advanced video. Timecode setup. Again, we're looking at controllers at the moment, but in here we can look at how well the signal's coming through. So if you do have timecode, it should be blue circle with a orange line through it. Again, I can do a separate one for that. That's not a problem. Now, loading. I would strongly advise you have loading only into stop deck. The reason being is if I do load a track here, and let me just get this up, and I'm just going to have the sound down just because of copyright. So I'm playing this and it's playing along, and I accidentally pressed the wrong button. Deck stopped into. It's only going to. The deck is locked, so you're not going to be able to accidentally drop something in. If, for instance, you have that unticked and you drag it in, it's going to completely stop the song. And I've actually heard this happen on radio and in the club where I was. Not me, honestly, but it can happen. Your finger can slip off, it will do the wrong button. So I'd keep that ticked if I were you. Stop playback at the end of track. Now again, if you have this unticked and I click it to there and I click all the way to the end, it's never going to stop. And the problem is because we've got loading only into stop deck ticked, it won't load. So you want that ticked, really. Okay, they go together. Duplicate deck when loading same track. Now this is where we can load this up. Let's get the volume down on here. And we are going to play this song. And for instance, I don't know, deck A's glitching, or we just want to push it over. If we then move that over by click and drag, we can now play that, and it's instantly duplicated it. Okay, and it will also duplicate obviously the cue points, everything as well. Now be careful of phasing. Basically when two songs play together with the same frequencies, they can cancel themselves out, so just be careful of that. But you can use that for lots of different things, really cool things, with turntablism as well, with the duplicate decks. Load next at end of track does what it says. I like to have that off because I like to choose my own. Initially cue to load marker. Now I'm going to do a video on cue points anyway, but the load marker is this. Well, that's the grid one. If I set this up for a load marker, so I'm going to press there, and I'm going to turn this into load marker. Now, normally what it happens is it loads to the beginning of the song, and it's normally with this white triangle. So we're going to set this load marker, and it's always going to load to that. Now, again, that doesn't mean much to you at the moment. Hello, Malcolm. But it's good to have. And again, in another video, I'm going to show you how to use that. So that's really cool. I'm going to get rid of that enough for now. Activate fade in and out markers. Again, with cue points, I'm going to show you how to do that in another video. But have that ticked because they are really cool. And cruise loops playlist, you can have that on as well. Cruise mode is up here, and essentially, well, I'm going to show you properly in another video, but if you've got a playlist or a track collection you're running and you want to play one song and you want it to automatically change over to the next song, we can use cruise mode, okay, which is, it can be handy. Resetting controls. Now, I never have these ticked because I like to have my hardware match my software. So if my mid is at 9 o'clock on my hardware, I want it to match my software. The problem is if I change all these down, let's change that there, and let's change that. Now if I load another track, I wonder if I can do that. Let me load up there. If I load up these tracks, none of this gets changed, which is really good because it references my hardware. Okay, but if I click them, okay, and I'm even going to change that there. Now if I load a track, it's going to instantly reset everything to default, 12 o'clock's halfway, volume up. And I don't want that. I want it to talk to the controller. I want it to just, you know, the controller and the software, I want it to be the same. So therefore, I have those unticked. And especially if you've got it in a different mode, imagine having your hardware look like this. Not that you'd ever have that mid that high, so let's change that. So we're going to change that, change this. Now imagine if we had our mixer like, or even worse, that. And then we loaded up another track. So now our hardware is going to say all these different things, but our software is actually going to show... it would help if I did this. Change that back. So then if I load this, it's going to reset everything, but we don't know because we're looking at the hardware thinking we can bring it in, and it's not going to be the case. So that isn't brilliant. So I do always do advise you can see everything. I make sure I can see everything on the software that I can see on my hardware, hence why I have it on mixer mode, and I make sure that I have these unticked. Hopefully that's helping. Transport. Now this is where we can set the tempo range from 2% to 100. That's really handy because no other software, I believe, apart from Serato, can do this. And 2% is brilliant. So what that means is I can go, you see this says 70, I can really fine tune this from 68.6 to 71. So I can really move it slowly, bit by bit. If I have it up to, say, 50, each increment is massive. You know, it's so... it's jumping far too much, so we don't really want that. The only reason why I personally would use 50 or 100 is for party tricks, but I'm used to 12/10s, so it's going to be 8, maybe 6, depending on how I feel. Tempo bend is just sensitivity on here, so don't worry too much. Now tempo sync and beat sync, this is something that people get confused with. If I was going to be using beat sync, I probably would be I'd have an S8 or a D2 where I haven't got any jog wheels. And what that means is if I load up this track twice, and this hasn't been beat graded perfectly, but let's just sync these both. Let's do that, 70. Okay, let's sync that. Now imagine these tracks they're both different. Again, I'm going to have the volumes down for now. But if I play this one and I play quantize, snap on, and I play this one, now I can't do anything about it now. If you notice the phase is gone there. I used to be able to have an arrow here, and that means if my beat grid is wrong, then I'm not going to be able to change it at all. So if I have it in tempo sync and they're both wrong, I can nudge it, which means I'm using my ears to nudge things and not just my beat grid, because if my beat grid's wrong, it's just no good. Okay, so again, I would advise tempo sync is a lot better. VK below 8% is bearable for smaller tempo faders like the S4 Mark 1 and Mark 2. Yeah, I agree. Luckily with the S4 Mark 3, the pitch bend now is a lot bigger, so you can really hone it. Remix decks can be tempo master, don't worry too much about that. Key lock, leave it on scratch, but it's entirely up to you what you do with your key lock. I don't see the point too much of loops because every loop's going to be different, so I don't need it to auto detect. I'm going to have it 1 bar, half bar, quarter bar, whatever, or 32 beats, whatever. Play count, minimum. This is quite handy if you're playing a gig, and especially if you're going through stuff. So if I have this on 0 and I instantly load up a track and I press play, what it's going to do is, let me just load that one up. Okay. Play, where are you? Play count. Where's my play count gone? Where are you? There you are. Come over here. Okay. So what's going to happen is my play count is going to register straight away. So I don't want that. I like to personally drag a track in, listen to it for a bit, and then decide. So if I have mine on, say, 3 seconds, and I load this up. Okay, so hopefully after 3 seconds, it's going to kick in to say play count 1. Is it, or is it not? Is it going to be... Nope. It's not, is it? So let's do this one again. There's 1, 2, 3. No, that's going to be a pain in your bum. basically on here, when the play count should happen. Now on Traktor 2, I know this works perfectly. I'm going to do a bit more digging in there, but basically if it plays after a certain time, it will show up in the play count. And I like to have mine on about 10 seconds-ish, so therefore I know it's not going to come up saying I've played it already. In Traktor Pro 2, it just used to have a little tick, which I actually quite liked. I don't need to see this because I don't care whether I've played it more than once, because I'm not going to. Beat counter, beat bars per phrase. Now bars per phrase is very subjective to the song, so therefore it's always going to be different. It normally, 4s, 8s, 16s, 32s, 24s, whatever. So that really is irrelevant to me. Mouse control, vinyl, so that means I can hold it and move it around like this. If I have it in snap, it's a bit like beat sync, so that means I have to move it and it only goes to the beat grid. But if the beat grid is wrong, this is useless. So have it on vinyl mode. And one button that's never been assigned to anything, and I'd love to know who actually uses the cup mode, the Q play mode. That means cup. So if I press it once, okay, on release, that means I can press it, hold it, and then let go. This is actually quite popular years ago when we used to have kill switches, which I miss, even though they're there, they're not mapped to anything. Decks layout. We can have track deck, remix deck, stem deck, live input, but we can also do that by clicking the letter. So if you want a remix deck or a stem or live input, so it's entirely up to you. And we can. This is where we also can show C and D. So if you want to do 4-deck mixing, there it is. Okay. Tempo faders, that's these bad boys here. You can have those on or off. And platoscopes, so if you're going to be using, again, DVS, time code, anything like that, you can have those on or off. Grid mode. Let's go over to here. Let's double up this grid. Just 1 second. I'm just going to double this up. Okay, change that just so you can see it a bit easier. So grid mode, they're these little white lines there. Hopefully you know them by now, but if not, I'm going to be doing a video on those grid modes. If you I've lost it here. If you have it on full, you see they're quite bright. Now it's not too bad for now, but if you zoom out, it can get a bit much. Same with there's ticks, but then that means I don't know where my actual beat grid is, so I want to make sure that I can see it. And lastly, invisible, obviously looks nice, but I can't beat grid it. But this is great for you if you don't use beat gridding at all, and you only use it like in vinyl mode basically. But I'll have mine on dim so I can see them, and then I can zoom in and out. And then I can show minute markers, which is down here. So these white lines here, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's entirely up to you if you have those on or not. Bar markers. Okay, this is something new in 3. So you can have basically like Rekordbox did with on the 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that's cool if you've definitely got the 1. It's also cool if you only got 4/4 music. If you've got something that changes tempo or time signature, that's not going to help you. It might hinder you, but it's good to have those on, and it's good to have an option this time. And let's talk about color mode. I always harp on about this. So let's have a look at this lovely color. So you can have it in ultraviolet, which is like this blue color to me. Infrared, it's like this gold. Then you've got X-ray, which I don't know, makes me feel a little bit dead inside for some reason. And then spectrum. Now spectrum's really cool, and I do advise you use this, or at least try it, because the colors actually mean something. So we're talking about reds and pinks are going to be the low sounds, so like your bass, your drums, your bass drums, that sort of thing. And then you go up a little bit, so you've got your greens and your blues, which is more your melodies and your vocals and stuff. And then you get your high ends, which is like your yellows, and that's like your really high pitched noises. So that means I can see on this here that green, there's only green there, so I know what's going on. There's only blue here, there's pink, so I know that's going to be bassy and bass drummy, and it's just really useful. And I don't know why you would want other colours on there, but again, let me know if you use them and why you use them, because I'm always interested to see how other people work. Deck header, show cover art, that's down at the top left, sorry, at the top left there, so you can have that on, and your phase meter. So that's what I was talking about earlier, so you can have that on and off. Track decks, you can rename anything you want up here, it's entirely up to you. Don't worry too much about the advanced tabs because they are here. Okay, and if you want to change your deck sizes, just double click, double click, double click, double click, double click. Then you can change them to whatever you want. You may want to change the size if you've got different size screens, but I always use mine on advanced because I'm used to teaching it. Track ending warning does exactly what it says. If we go to 36 seconds, so if I'm playing this and I don't know, I'm just not paying attention, this will start flashing at 30 seconds, and I think 30 seconds is good because if you get used to it having it at 2 minutes all the way up here, you're going to know. It's a bit like hitting your snooze button and you set your alarm for 5 minutes early. You're going to go, well, I've got 2 minutes left, so it's not important, and then by the time you've got 10 seconds left, you've forgotten. So it's entirely up to you. But again, I have mine on 30. Okay. Position play marker, that's this red line. So this, wherever this red line is, if I turn the volume up just a touch for now, because I'm not going to play anything. Okay. If I'm moving this, this is what's playing. So that line there. If I decide I want it all the way to the front, I can move this over there. So I can, it's just there. I don't know if you can see that, hopefully. And again, if I move it all the way to the back, okay, I can move it there. VK, greetings from Finland. Hello, Finland. F feels like the Eurovision. Hello, Finland. Those advanced tabs switchable via S4 Mark III to being used the RG pads. Those advanced tabs switchable via the S4 Mark III. Do you know what? I don't know. Is that a question or is that a statement, VK? I think it's a question, but I don't think you could switch the advanced tabs around using the S4. You've never been able to with any other controller, including the S8, which is still their parent controller. So I would say no, but you could MIDI map it for sure. But it just means you're going to lose a function unless you learn how to do 2 shifts and something, which could be quite interesting. Maybe do a video on it. I'd love to learn from you. So the problem with having the play marker one side or the other is one thing that Traktor is very unique for is when you loop something on here, you can move it around. You can actually move the loop sample or the loop, which means if you've got it all the way to one side or the other, you can't see what's before or after. But again, this is preferences, and that's why. All right, stripe view, don't worry too much. It's just this to do with this here, but I have mine on track. Default zoom, that obviously is when you press equals there, so you can zoom out, and then you can press equals. I like to have mine so it doesn't make me feel sick, but I can see what's going on. Remix decks. So we're going to show volume phases. That remix decks I wouldn't worry about too much. If you're watching this video, it's to do with preferences, so you're probably not going to get onto the remix decks yet, but I've got lots of videos coming up for the remix decks because I absolutely love them and I do a lot of stuff with them, so I will show you another time on that. Mixer. Now this is something which is quite cool. These are emulators up here. So the EQs, which is up here, you can choose from a classic, an emulator, then well I might just use some other controller for some advanced features to change the view on TP3 to show Q loop grid advanced tab view. Well, the only thing is, VK, you shouldn't need to play around with them whilst you're mixing, so you should be able to just do your prep working in the advanced and then maybe turn it off. My advice, but again, you can, if you are going to buy a cheap pad to MIDI map, I strongly advise, where is it? The where have I got it? Not the LPK. You can use the LPK, but I've lost it now. Not completely, I just mean, you know. I've got a pad, and with 8 pads. It's an Akai, little Akai. It goes with the LPK25, and that's really cool. So maybe look at one of those. They're only about £20. Anyway, back to the EQs. You can emulate the EQs from the DJM Pioneer 600, the 800. Oh, nice. The K2 should be able to be mini-map then, VK. And then you've got the Zone, Alan Heath, and you've got the Nuo Ekla. So you can use them, and there are differences in sound, so have a play with them. Same as the filter type, have a play with those. Now, just be warned, if you are going to select the Zone, it changes this into high, mid-low, and low. Now, no Traktor controller actually has these. In fact, I don't know many mixers that use this system apart from the Allen and Heath. So if you've got a controller and you use the mid EQ, it's only going to roll off the mid-low. So just remember that. So I'm going to have mine back on there. The mixer effects, they are these bad boys here. These orange one here and here. You can choose between reverb, dual delay, noise, time gator, flanger, barber pole, dotted delay, crush, and filter. I can't see the point of having filter because unless you're using another controller, if you're using the S4 Mark III, then there is actually a filter separate button other than the 4 mixer slots. But you've got all these you can choose from, which is cool. So you can also drop them down and use them whichever way you want. Auto crossfade time. This is when you can click this button here and it will auto crossfade. It's entirely up to you if you use it or not, and it works alongside the cruise mode as well. We've got smooth and sharp. Now this is if you scratch, or I'll tell you other reasons as well, but smooth is it's a crossfade, so this will get quieter. So if I load this up and I put this on 32, activate, let's put this on 4. So if I put this up and I change this to 65. Okay, so when you can hear this, let me just put my headphones on. So what you're going to be able to do is, if I move this, you can hear it get quieter. And that's all well and good for some people, but for me, I don't like it because I don't want this to dictate the volume. So you can either, let me just stop that for a minute. You can either turn them off, which is just by selecting these buttons here, or on the front of some of the controllers you can do that, which means this does nothing. Okay. My mouse is going mad. There. Or if you are going to have these on and you have it on sharp, it's instant, so you're going to be able to crab until your heart's content. So it doesn't matter where I move this now, and the moment I move it over to here, you see how, so it's the same volume. Now even if I'm not scratching, I'll still have that on because I like to choose my volumes by my faders because they're a lot more easy to control other than the crossfaders, so I'm not going to worry about that too much. Okay, so I'm going to have that on sharp. Enable auto gain. Now I don't have this on. I only would advise to have this on if you are just DJing on your laptop, but then I wouldn't always advise that anyway. So what I would do is if you have it on, you see this button up here, okay, and that means it will auto gain. I would always say to people, get used to matching it with your ears. So when you load up something, if you don't have it on, that means you know you have to check your levels between the tracks. Enable limiter. Now with Traktor Pro 3, it's easier now. It's actually, you want the transparent because it's a lot better. And I'll have mine on -6. Limiters basically mean if you go up to a certain level, it will push back on you. But now Traktor Pro 3 has done a lot of work behind the scenes. The volume and the sound is so much better. So I personally would have it like that. Mixer layout. Now you can choose whether to have your EQ on, your filters, your crossfader. But again, if you're using them, I would advise you can have them on so you can see them. Global settings, this is the top where you can see the effects. You can turn them on or off depending on your screen size. Okay. and then full resolution on screen on your desktop, which is up here. Tooltips. Now, if you're not used to the GUI and you're not sure what things do, have this on. If you have it over there, it will actually tell you what's going on. And this is a great way to learn without having to sift through the manual. And then you know you're going to get annoyed with it. By the time you get annoyed with it, that means it's time to turn it off because you know enough. Effects. We're going to talk about effects in another video, but this is how you can choose 2 or 4 effects. Weirdly now, if you have 4 effects on singles plus this, it means you can have 13 effects on one track. I'd like to see how that's used well. Mix recorder. So if you have your global settings on, you can have it on internal, you can have it at 2 gig, and if you click this reel to reel, you can see up here and you can see the volume of it as well. I always have mine on around -6, -5, because otherwise it peaks and you don't want anything to distort. Anything that goes in the red is bad. Red means bad in this game. Loop recorder. I'm not going to show you loop recorder today, but that is this thing up here, which is really cool. I'll do a video just on that later on. Broadcasting. Now you can broadcast from Traktor onto, you can stream it live online. So if you wanted to, you can just make up your proxy servers and stuff and then click that button up there, and then you'll be able to stream live. Now obviously you need to know your copyright laws and stuff like that. That's up to you. But you could always do what the manual says in Traktor Pro 2, which is use an external piece of software like Nicecast, which is very easy to use. So I probably would advise that's probably worth a tenner. But you can set this up yourself if you want to. Browser details. This is where you can change your fonts to whatever you want. Your size. You can change your row size up and down. I put mine back on 21. Preview player. That's this thing over here. Now, I personally don't use that myself, but that means you can use it to load up a track and listen to it. Show cover art. That's down there. So if I load up that, you can see the cover art's there. Yeah, VK. So Icecast, Nicecast are the ones that they recommend, but you know, they both do the job. I just happen to have Nicecast. Layout manager. Now, if you've decided to make a really unique preference, you can actually save it by adding it and putting it up. And if I didn't teach Traktor for a living, then I would get rid of Essential and Extended because I never use them, but I have to keep them. But you can set up all your different ways and then have it up here. So when you drop down, you can then choose it from up there. File management. Now, again, preferences, but if you have import music folders at startup, determine track time automatically before analysis, analyze new import tracks, and show consistency of a check report on startup, all ticked, breathe. The problem with that is when you do start your Traktor, it's going to do loads of stuff. And if you're not up to date with it, or you know you've got some new tracks in, it's going to take a while. So I like to analyze mine either overnight or bit by bit. So I personally have all those turned off. But I do have analyze new tracks when loading into D.A.V.E because that's how I analyze most of my stuff, and also save created loops and samples automatically. So in there, that is this option here. So in all samples, whenever you make a loop or a sample, you can actually, it saves automatically right at the bottom here, and I think that's brilliant. I use them a lot, so that's cool. Don't worry too much about their directories. Now, I wouldn't touch the root directory because that means Traktor won't be able to find its own program. Sample directory and remix directory, again, leave those as is, but you can move them if you need to. And this is your iTunes library. There is a little hack you can do if you want to use like Beatport library, but I just have it on iTunes because it's a lot easier. If you do run a external hard drive, add it in here and it will always look for it, so it's nice and simple. Analyze options. You might as well have it on automatic. It didn't used to have this selection ages ago, but have it on automatic. It just detects everything. Store beat marker as hot cue, which is what we were talking about earlier. So if I load up this track again, you can see that white one. That's a beat marker. So you can do that, and I'm going to talk about there's a possibility of an infinite amount of beat markers. So yeah, I'm going to show you how to do them in another video, but that's that. And we can also display keys. So if the keys down here, for anyone who mixes in key, you may understand 1M and 1D, but you might want to get into it. But if you do know your musical theory, you can have your A minor, G flats, G flat minors, or you can have them all in sharps for some reason as well. So you can choose that, and then you can choose how to write it to your tags. So OpenKey, which is your Traktor key. Control Manager. This is something that I can't wait to be updated, because when you decide, when you've got a so if I select this one, this now disappears. But hopefully there's going to be an update soon, which means I can delve into the S4 Mark III and just tweak buttons, which I can't wait to remap some buttons that I don't use. That will be really cool for me. For instance, the new S4 Mark III doesn't have an in and out, and I always use an in and out. So I'm going to totally be mapping that somehow or somewhere. And then lastly, you go down to the your hardware. So if I'm to select the S4 Mark III, I can choose my tempo faders to be absolute or relative. The browsers to be favorites or tree. I think it should always default to tree, because that's how I want to scroll, but you can use your plus sign, your star sign, but that is one of the things I'm definitely going to overmap because I never use it. Your ticks, that's obviously your haptic feedback, so you can change that from fine, coarse or none. Your jog wheel tension, now you can change this by holding jog and then spinning your platter, but you can move that up there. Bass speed, it's there. I'm not sure why, what difference it makes, but again, if you find a use for it, please comment in the down below. And it's also one thing that I've noticed in here, you haven't got calibration. Now I don't know how it works now because I'm not an IT bod, but we've got restore to default there. But in this one, we've got calibration. So if, for instance, your crossfaders over to one side like that, but the software's showing that, you can recalibrate it. But in the Mark IIIs, I'm curious to know how they're going to use that. But maybe they're so good they don't need to be recalibrated. So we shall see. So in here, these are where you can change all your bits and pieces. So if you are running Traktor Pro 3 with a S4 Mark II, you can change your sample play buttons, for instance, to hot cues. So you've got 8 hot cues. You've got manual or auto loop, which I always use manual, which is really, really handy. You can disable the jog wheels and all sorts of stuff, change the brightness. D2s, you can do stuff like shift and touch to scratch the... so in yours, where's your VK? What did you say you had? You had an S4 Mark I. Oh no, so sorry, you had an where are you? You've got an S8. So in the S8, you can actually, you probably know this, but you can touch and shift and touch to scratch while it's playing. And if you do that in flux mode, it's really, really cool to do. And you can change all your beat jumps and loop points, loop jumps in there so as well. So basically, that is the preferences. I'm going to be doing some more videos. The S4 Mark III, uneven loops like 3/4 via the 2 encoders and shift and hold it down, perhaps. Possibly, yeah. I really like the 3s. I love 3s because it just gives it a nice triplet feel, which I'm mad for. I'm mad for the triplets. But yeah. So this is video, just a quick brief video on the preferences. I just wanted to show you how to get going and how to start playing with sync, and just try those preferences. If you make a mistake, you can always just do a reset up wizard. Okay, so I would really play around with these. Be careful of file management and control manager, but everything else you can't do any damage. It's all about preferences. 3 is the magic number. I know a song about that. So you play around with these and get your preferences the way you want them. And if you're not sure, or you think, oh, I've just cocked it all up, set up wizard and then run through that. and you'll be fine. Okay, so have a mess around. Comment below if you need anything else. I'm happy to help out if there is anything you need help with. But till then, I will do another video for next week on another section of getting going with Traktor. So thank you very much for watching and joining in, and I'll speak to you soon.